The opinions expressed in the following video are not in their entirety endorsed by this podcast. They are instead the focus of our discussion today. This is your content warning.
I did one video on artificial intelligence in the Bible, and people started acting crazy. So here are a couple of explanations in scriptures. First of all, you have to read the scripture with the right mindset, because many of the men in the Old Testament were given visions about the time that we live in. They were looking into the future at a modern society and did not have the vocabulary to explain what they saw, so they had to use the terms of that day to explain what they were seeing in a vision in our day. For example, the Apostle John was given a vision of warfare in the future. He didn't know what a helicopter was, so he said it looks like a grasshopper. He said its wings roar like the sound of many horses galloping. That's the sound a helicopter would make. He also said that this grasshopper had the ability to shoot snakes that had fire in their tails. Well, that's what a missile would look like to somebody 2,000 years ago who was looking into the future. You can find that in Revelation 9:7-10 and Revelation 9:18-19. In Daniel 12:4, the angel told Daniel that his vision of end-time events would happen when people would move with speed and there would be an explosion of knowledge. An angel could not tell him it would be a time of technology and it would be a time of artificial intelligence, because that did not exist back then. So he had to simply say men will move with speed and there'll be an explosion of knowledge. What he was talking about was a time of technology and the rise of AI. In Revelation 13, John said he was looking 2,000 years in the future. He said he saw men create a statue. He watched them give the statue life, which is electricity, and then the statue had the ability to speak. When a man is looking into the future, he doesn't know that this is a robot. He thinks it's a statue. But what he said about the statue is that when they brought it to life, the statue was the one who gave the command for everyone to receive the mark 666. That's found in Revelation chapter 13. Hit the follow button for more.
Audio Jungle.
Joshua, it's good to see you again, man.
Good to see you, buddy.
Oh, I'm excited. This is episode. So I was looking at our log because we're fancy. We have a log now, but I was looking at our log. This is episode 55 that we're recording. So I mean, do whatever math you want to. If we're doing 12 episodes a season, once a month, we've made it to 55 episodes. However many years that is going to be the thing that we release on April Fools, but won't actually be an April Fool's Day joke. It's just going to be when we release it. So I just thought that was awesome. Like, we've done this for 55 episodes. People have, for whatever reason, clicked on our videos and decided that we're worth listening to, at least for a little while. But we do appreciate it. I appreciate regardless of how long you watch. If you're going to click off of our video, do us a favor, though. If you watch like 5 minutes of the video and then decide you want to do something else, just go ahead and grab the little bar at the end and like fast forward all the way to the end of the video. So YouTube thinks that you've watched the whole thing, and that helps us a lot. But man, how's it been? How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Just trying to transition to a new role. So a lot of people know that I'm leaving the congregation at Salem Creek and going to work with the congregation at Fairlane and Shelbyville, and love both places and hope nothing but the best for both places. But my last Sunday is this coming Sunday, which is March 29th. And my first Sunday will be Easter Sunday at Fairlane. So we're very, very excited about that. But that's what's going on in our world right now.
Man, that's awesome. That's super excited for you guys. Really excited for you to do that. And that'll be great. I hope for you and your family and for everybody involved in all of that together. But before you do any of that, you have more important things to worry about. Meaningly, pointlessly, whatever. I don't know what the word is. Predominantly speaking, you have to explain to our audience the entire interpretation of the book of Revelation, because that's what we're going to talk about today. Is whether or not AI is in the Bible. And so, guys, welcome back to the Content Warning Podcast. This is a Bible meets culture podcast. We break down the difference between modern theology and biblical content. We say this, I feel like we say this a lot, but it might not be any better on display, the difference between modern theology and biblical content, than what we're going to talk about today. We might get to talk about AI on a broad spectrum, but we do have a very specific video that we want to get to that concerns AI. And I know AI, Joshua, I know you dabble with it quite a bit. I love using ChatGPT for like image I'm not an artist. I've never been an artist. I dabble in graphic design occasionally, but I love using ChatGPT to produce images for me for visual aids and stuff like that. AI has become a really, really popular thing. And it's one of those things that um, Christians of all beliefs have some type of what's the word I'm looking for? Concern about,
Yeah.
or a little bit cautious toward, in a lot of ways. One of the first times that I've heard of this particular instance where AI is the one who gives the mark of the beast in Revelation, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But Joshua, give me your initial impressions of this video. I know you have taught Christian ethics in the past. I know that AI is kind of something that you have honed in on before, but give me your first impressions of the video from the guy from Lionheart Church. By the way, I forgot to look up this guy's name. I wish I had done that, but he's from Lionheart Church. The video we're going to look at that you guys have just watched or listened to is actually a video in response to a sermon that he did where he gave illustrations of why AI is kind of the beginning of the end times, right? That AI was that mentioned in Revelation 9 as well as 13. It was the thing that was given to Daniel in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4. And so we'll get through all of those things. But Josh, I want to know what your initial reaction was to the video.
Yeah, I don't think this topic could have come at a more timely point for me personally, because, as I was telling you before we recorded, we just finished for the McGarvey College of the Bible, which is a graduate school of preaching. We just finished the study of biblical doctrine of last things, where the most of the time we spend our time looking at the doctrine of the resurrection, 1 Corinthians
Mhm.
15, 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5. But then we kind of fast walked through Revelation. So this past Monday, me and three graduate students went through the whole book of Revelation in 2 hours. And that was it was a whirlwind. And I don't know that we necessarily got into the weeds of anything. But you can understand the book of Revelation with 2 words. We can talk about that later if you want to.
Mhm.
But
I
um,
got you.
so I just finished teaching that. Our Salem Creek Book Club, we read a book a quarter and then meet and discuss it. Our last book was called 2084 by John Lennox, which is about the Christian and AI.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful book. Now, I don't agree with John on everything, which is
Sure.
kind of the case with writing and reading books, but it is a fantastic book. I would encourage every Christian to get that and read it. And then this guy talks about the book of Daniel.
Mhm.
Well, I taught Daniel in our adult Bible class about a year ago. So these are things that the issues that he brings up and the imagery that he brings up are things that are fresh on my mind, because we might kind of, from our perspective, laugh at this. We don't need to, because it is a very popular view. It's very
Absolutely.
popular, and so we just kind of need to extend some grace and just look at what the Bible says and how to practice proper hermeneutics, which is what we do in this podcast.
Yeah. Going all the way back to episode 1, right? We established our Swiss cheese theology
Right.
model. But Otha or Otha, Turnbow is the guy's name from Lionheart Church. It's actually a church in Georgia, I
Mm.
believe. But he comes up with this. And Joshua, the very first thing that went through my head, like before I really dug into what he was saying, the very first thing that went through my head was something we've talked about before. You can make the Bible say whatever you want, right? Like I can pull anything I want from wherever I want. I can make the Bible fit whatever idea I have. If for those of you that are in kind of biblical circles, that's called eisegesis, right? It's taking something that I already believe or taking a meaning that I already have and placing it in the text and making the text fit what I say, as opposed to bringing meaning out of the text. And this is one of those that I was curious. I still am about how much people actually cared about something like this, because I think especially when you live in a more rural community like I do, um, AI is a thing and ChatGPT is a thing, but not a prominent thing. Does that make sense? So like
Yeah.
everybody knows that it's out there, and when I say prominent, I mean prominent in use
Mhm.
of people that I interact with every day, right? So like everybody knows that it's out there. Every single teenager that I work with has social media, and they know 100% that half the stuff they see is an AI video, an AI picture, an AI headline. There was a news article the other day. We were actually joking about this. Most everybody's probably seen this at this point. There was a news article the other day that I thought was an AI headline. I spent 15 minutes fact checking about a quadriplegic cornhole player.
Yep.
for those of you that are unaware, it's a very Florida man sounding news story that happened in Maryland. But anyway, but I thought it was AI, and so we're aware of it. We're cognizant of it. We're cautious of those type of things. But I think sometimes people go, well, AI is something that just other people deal with, and I don't, because I don't use it every single day. And so my first thought was, man, I can make the Bible say whatever I want. But as I started digging into this, I'm not going to say that my beliefs on some interpretation of Revelation changed, but I was really kind of blown away, Joshua, kind of what you were saying, how popular of an idea this is. That AI is what is being spoken of specifically in the book of Revelation.
Yeah,
This is a very, very widely accepted belief, and I say very widely, much more wide than I think most people would give credence to when they hear the idea right off the bat.
yeah.
But I thought that was really, really, really interesting, and so we're just going to kind of walk through the video piece by piece, same thing that we always usually do. We're just going to kind of talk about some of the things that he was talking about. And so, if you've listened or watched the video, one of the very first things they said is that he made an original video, which we've kind of talked about already. But he first place that he goes to, and if you guys, anybody watching or listening along, if you are not driving or something along those lines, go ahead and just kind of mark in your Bible Revelation, as well as Daniel. Those are going to be the two places that we kind of go to, and we'll walk through some of this stuff. But the very first thing that he says is we have to read Scripture with the right mindset. Joshua, agree or disagree?
Oh yeah. I mean, we
100%, right? Like
have to,
neither one of
we
us
have
have
to
any
approach
issues with that,
Scripture
right?
the way Scripture wants to be approached.
Yes. So neither one of us have any issues with him saying that the Bible has to be read with the correct mindset. But then he goes on and he says that people in the Old Testament were given visions of about a time that we live in today, right? That they were looking into the future, and that the visions that they were given were the ones that are of us today. And so, Joshua, you can correct me if I'm wrong. We can disagree, maybe one of the first times we ever disagreed on the podcast, but I think it's a pretty big presupposition that the visions given to people in the Old Testament were of us specifically. I certainly don't see any confidence that you can say that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, again, could they have been of a more modern time close to where we live in? Sure. But to confidently say that the visions given to Daniel or to John were of our time specifically, I think might be a massive presupposition that really dictates the rest of where this conversation goes.
Yeah, the thing about that is we misunderstand so much what prophecy is and what the role of a prophet is. A prophet is one who carries a message from God to an audience. So, for example, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles. Those in the Hebrew canon are called the former prophets
Hmm.
because anyone who wrote scripture was considered a prophet. But you don't go to the book of Joshua for prophecy
Sure.
as somebody looking into the future. So a prophet is not necessarily someone who tells the future. There
Hmm.
are times in the prophets where they speak of the coming day of the Lord, which is obviously a future reality, but their message is always intended for the audience who hears it,
Mm.
right? So I'm not going to tell you something that doesn't apply to you, but does apply to someone 5,000 years from now.
Sure.
Right. So, and the prophets were primarily preachers. We need to remember that.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I have a hard time with that because it's just the case that these these prophets were not necessarily looking into the future. That's the big hang up. Now, to be fair, every generation after the early church or
Hmm.
after the first century church thought that the prophecies of the Old Testament day of the Lord and the prophecies of Revelation were happening in their time.
Sure.
And we think that today, right? We think that the Antichrist is some government, or we think it's AI, or the mark of the beast is a computer chip, or whatever. Well, back in World War II, people believed that that was Hitler. They believed it was Auschwitz. The Japanese, like all of these things. So it is interesting, and I think it speaks to the beauty of Scripture that the main message of these prophecies, which is that God is ultimately is going to win and that you just need to persevere, is true for every generation,
Sure.
regardless of what challenges we face.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we get really hung up on is I'm gonna again, everybody that's watched us for the last 55 episodes knows that Joshua's the smart one and I'm not. It's not even close. But um, this I think one of the reasons we get confused is because when you start dabbling into Daniel and Revelation, um, people, if you've grown up in church, you've heard this word before, I know, but this apocalyptic literature,
Mm,
right? And how apocalyptic literature, you've probably heard the preacher cliche that is that type of writing has always been used as an identifier, not a predictor,
mm,
right? And so this isn't a specific prediction of something of a singular moment in time that is going to happen. It is an identifier as, hey, when something like this is happening, you need to pay attention. And it- Joshua, to your point, we've applied those sort of things throughout the course of human history, right? World War One, World War Two. Literally just a few years ago. Just a few years ago with Israel and Palestine, you had people talking of the rapture because of things that were because of unrest over in the Middle East. You've seen it now with AI. We talked a little bit before everything came on, Joshua, about uh, the idea of this explosion of technology, which we'll get into in a little bit, right? He kind of goes on and talks about this explosion of technology. Well, there have been several explosions of technology in our lifetime, right? From home computers to smartphones to now AI, and apocalyptic literature has a tendency for us to miss the forest for sake of the trees,
hmm
right? Like we want to hone in so much on these vague, weird little details. And it's really interesting to me. Then maybe this is just me. Maybe this is just a weird Nathan thing, which is totally fine if it is. But why we treat apocalyptic literature like that? I've never once watched a movie, Joshua, and looked at extras in the background and go, I wonder what they're representing. Like, I wonder what the meaning is behind this little vague thing over here in the corner. No, we pay attention to what the main point of the story is. And so, but for whatever reason, when we get into things like Daniel and Revelation, or at least the second half of Daniel and Revelation,
Right.
we want to try to make everything mean something entirely different. And it changes all the time, right? I remember growing up. This is my fun revelation story. I remember growing up when I was really really little. Y2K. I'm still old. Like I'm old. I'm old enough that I can remember what Y2K was, and
Yeah,
I
and I'm
remember
older than you.
exactly right. Barely, but I yeah. I remember that, and I remember talking to my dad about people were talking about the end of the world because we were flipping from the '90s to like what was going to happen with the zeros and everything. And my dad said, I can confidently say that anytime you hear somebody predict the end of the world to a specific day, he goes, I'm fairly confident it'll either happen before or after, but it won't be that day.
Yeah.
Like that was my dad's thing all the time growing up was it won't be that day. I was like, he's like, I think God has enough of a sense of humor that he's not going to let somebody be right on that particular day. But anyway, but that's neither here nor there. And so I think sometimes we miss a lot of that stuff. Um, so to remember that a lot of these things are supposed to be identifiers, not predictors of a very specific moment in time. He does say, and maybe Joshua, you can go into this a little bit too. He does say, and one thing that I do think maybe causes a bit of this is the vocabulary that they had back then was different than the vocabulary that we have today, and so they couldn't reference modern day things with things, like later on in the video, he'll mention a helicopter, right? John had no real inclination of what a helicopter really was because those things didn't exist. And so, how would you describe that? And again, it sounds good, right? We'll talk about that in a little bit when we get into Revelation chapter 9 because I think he's missing a couple of key components that helicopters may or may not have. But the vocabulary thing might be a bit of a credence that hinder or lends itself to maybe misapplying some of the things that we see as symbolic in scripture. Do you
hmm
think there's merit to that at all?
Um, I think to go back to your discussion of apocalyptic literature, biblical genre is very important. I'm not going to read the book of Psalms the way that I read Genesis, right?
Yeah.
Because Psalms is poetry, Genesis is narrative mostly. I'm not going to read Revelation the way that I read Matthew because
Mhm,
Revelation is apocalyptic. So this may be helpful to our audience. The first three letters in the word apocalyptic, APO, I
mhm,
have an acronym for that that will help you understand how to interpret apocalyptic literature. So, A, it's an attention grabber. When you
mhm.
read apocalyptic literature, you're hooked because I mean, it's just
It's
very
weird.
vivid. It's weird. It's
It's
vivid, right?
weird. We'll
Um,
look at it in just a second, but yeah, it's weird.
yeah. P, it is protective,
Mhm.
which means I write to you in apocalyptic literature because you know what it means. I know what it means, but somebody else does not know what it means.
Yeah,
Right. So Revelation is written to churches who are being persecuted. Should the government, the Roman government, get their hands on that document and see the spreading of the gospel of Jesus, that would be detrimental to the church. And so it's protective. Even the word apocalypsis means hidden, right?
mhm,
Um, and then the O is occasional, meaning that the apocalyptic literature refers to something happening that mattered for the author and audience of that time. So APO, attention, protective, occasional. If we remember that, we can have a good foundation on how to approach apocalyptic literature. Now, what you were saying about the vocabulary, it is true that these mechanical devices like helicopters or modern warfare, nuclear bombs, those kinds of things, that the ancient people would not have known about them. They would have not had a way to describe them. That's true. But when we see this heavenly realm, for example, the throne room in
mhm.
Revelation 4 and 5, when we see like Isaiah chapter 6 with God's presence in the temple, we see descriptions of these things that no eye has seen and no ear has heard, right? And
Yeah,
that's what so how do you describe that to someone who doesn't know it? Well, you use this imagery in sort of a parabolic sense that I'm going to take something you're familiar with, like a locust,
sure.
but I'm going to soup it up to describe what's happening here with these plagues. And by the way, I say it all the time, and I've been saying it more and more recently, but if you only know your New Testament, you don't know your New Testament.
Oh, for
You
sure.
cannot read Revelation 9 without first having read the Exodus.
Mhm.
Right? You
For
just can't
sure.
do it. So they use imagery, but they use it for a purpose. It's not necessarily to describe a thing,
Mhm.
but to describe the result of the thing or the event or the tragedy or the end result, we might say.
Yeah. Yeah, you make a really, really good point. And so, one of the first things that he does in that nature is he talks about how John. So this is John's exile, by the way, when he writes the Book of Revelation. He talks about. So if you're confused as to why I keep referencing John, John writes in Revelation in chapter 9, verses 7 through 10. He says that John's been given a vision of warfare, right? And so he didn't have. This is the example that he uses. He didn't have the ability to say what a helicopter was because he didn't know what a helicopter was, and so he describes it in the best way that he can, and he calls them grasshoppers. Okay, I could kind of see. Some modern day helicopters kind of having a very similar silhouette, maybe to a grasshopper or locust. But if you go into your Bible and look at Revelation 9, verse 7 through 10, it says, the appearance of locusts was like horses prepared for battle. Something like golden crowns was on their heads. Their faces were like human faces. They had hair like women's hair. They had teeth like lions' teeth. They had chest like iron breastplates. The sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots running with horses rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions. So their tails had the power to harm people for 5 months. So all of these things he mentions in the video specifically that they had the things that were on their heads and that they sounded like chariots and lots of horses. And yeah, if that's all you're paying attention to, yeah, when a helicopter first kind of gets going, you could maybe see an argument to be made for that sounds like an army of horses running. Those wings kind of sound like that. I do find it really interesting, though, that in the description that he gives of a helicopter, he doesn't say anything about having women's hair on it. He doesn't say anything about what the teeth looked like. I find it interesting that the tail of a scorpion, which had the power to harm people for 5 months, if I get smacked with the tail of a helicopter, I'm going to be down for a lot longer than 5 months. Just throwing that out there. But then he kind of goes down to verses 18 and 19. Um, I think it's verses 18 and 19, where he talks about the snakes that shot. Let's see, verse 17. This is how I saw the horses and their riders in the vision. They had breastplates that were fiery red, sulfur yellow. The heads of the horses were like the heads of lions. From their mouths came fire and smoke and sulfur. A third human race was killed by the three plagues, by the fire, by the smoke, and by the sulfur that came from their mouths. This was the power that they had, right? And so you could, for the power of the
Verse you're
horses,
talking about is verse 19.
yeah, verse 19 is, yeah, what I was looking at right here. For the power of the horses in their mouths and in their tails, because their tails, which resemble snakes, have heads that inflict injury, right? And so, kind of going back to what I said at the very beginning, yeah, if I really, really wanted to make that seem like a helicopter, I can pick and choose some of those things and I can make that seem like a helicopter. The problem that I think a lot of people run into is that is a apocalyptic description that could be a whole lot of things. It doesn't have to be a helicopter, right? There's also a lot of things that are missing, or things that are missing from his original video that aren't mentioned in scripture that maybe give a more complete picture of something as opposed to just a helicopter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think even that is an unnecessary argument. It's not a bad argument, but it's
Sure,
unnecessary because in verse 7, it says the appearance of the locust were like.
sure.
So you're describing this locust swarm. How
Hmm.
do you describe the locust swarm? And he's going to use really demonic imagery to describe the locust swarm, which is a demonic force on the world. Um, and but he doesn't. If he was going to describe, let's say that he had this vision of a helicopter, didn't know how to describe it, he wouldn't say the locusts were like because he's describing the locust. He would say
Right.
what I saw was like
Yeah.
the horse prepared for battle, and it sounded like this, and it had wings and hair and teeth and these things.
Right.
But it tells us what he's describing. He's
Mhm.
describing the locust swarm, which in their world was incredibly devastating. If you have a locust plague, you're going to be agriculturally and economically bare for at least 5 years,
Yeah,
right?
the
I
same
mean,
the same
terrible.
imagery is used. Yeah, the same imagery is used in multiple of the minor prophets.
Yes.
Talking in the Old Testament, talking about the day of the Lord, talking
Mhm.
about locusts, and every time that it's used in an Old Testament context, it is used to describe um, basically death,
Yeah.
right? Devastation and suffering.
Yeah.
Um,
Joel
for-
2:31, and then you go back to the Exodus, that's the 8th plague,
yeah,
and these plagues, I don't know if they build on themselves, but goodness, they just seem to get worse, and, I mean, a locust plague is just terrible, but the description, because a locust plague would be something that would be devastating to agriculture, right? It would eat plant and tree and grass and vegetation, but these don't do that, and so most scholars are going to connect with this with demonic spirits that are going to impact people. They're going to lead people astray. And then later in chapter 9, you have the judgment of God that comes against people in a limited sense, waiting for the full judgment of God. But it does come against people, and you have this sort of lion roar that's talked about with God. God's judgment against the wicked, which compares back to Amos 3:8.
mhm,
So again, if you only know your New Testament, you don't know your New Testament.
right.
And that's what I see most, Nathan, with these people who try to bring Revelation or Daniel or Ezekiel into today
Yeah.
is they just don't know their
Hmm.
Old Testament.
Yeah. And that's made pretty obvious, I think, with the next one too, because the next thing that he follows up with immediately is he goes into Daniel chapter 12, right? And so Daniel's vision, he says that the Lord told Daniel that in his vision, the end events, right, the end of times would happen in a moment when his words were, people would move with speed and there would be an explosion of knowledge. And so Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4 says, but you, Daniel, keep these words secret and seal the book until the time of the end. Many will roam about and knowledge will increase. Okay, now you and I talked a little bit about this before we got on recording. I would really love to know exactly what translation he was using for that particular verse in Daniel, because knowledge increasing. Sure, I can give you that one. Explosion of knowledge, knowledge increasing. Maybe those are things that can coincide. But many will roam about. Joshua, I don't know about you, but if I'm setting out just to roam around, I'm not moving quickly. I'm literally, it's more of a, as we in the South would say, it's more of a mosey type pace. But Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4, this explosion of knowledge, this increase in knowledge, and that meaning you're going to move with speed. I'll let you talk about the language here in a second, but we talked about a little bit about this before. That has been something multiple times throughout the course of just our lifetime, right? You saw it with smartphones. You saw it with when they put at-home computers, the original supercomputer when it was created. That was a mark of the beginning of the end times. Joshua, you told me beforehand that you had seen where the invention of the automobile was kind of
Hmm.
pegged as the beginning of the end times, maybe referencing to Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4. And so I think one, again, going back to apocalyptic literature being an identifier, not a predictor, I think trying to pinpoint a specific moment in time where this has happened uh, is a bit, I don't want to say foolish. That makes it sound harsh, but is at the very least maybe not the safest thing to do, right? Like this just feels a little silly to try to pinpoint one specific moment in time, especially when that one specific moment has been predicted before,
Hmm.
right, or has been applied before. And so, but in kind of what you'll talk about here in a second, that word there for roaming, I really want to know where he got the word speed, right? Where men would move quickly or with a certain amount of speed.
Yeah, some of the study Bibles have that as a footnote, and that's very
Okay.
concerning. This is a common thing, and I have, like I said, I was teaching the Book of Daniel, and I
Yeah.
saw in many commentaries and many study Bibles this idea of historically, ever since really the Enlightenment, people have said that the invention of automobiles or modern transportation, trains, airplanes, those kinds of things would is what's referenced here. As you rightly pointed out, this phrase it comes from the Hebrew word "shoot." It's the PL imperative or PL imperfect, I should say, which is kind of it's not a future tense. It's like incompleted action, meaning they are currently doing it.
Mhm.
The better translation would be to move without direction. Rove about would be a good one, but we don't really talk that way.
Yeah.
Net Bible says many will dash about. The ESV says, what does the ESV say? Verse 4, shall run to and fro. That's good. But you only can, well, let me say this. The Bible tells us what it means when it says
Yeah.
this. We just have to go to another passage. So in
Right.
Amos chapter 8 and verse 12,
Mhm.
Amos says, they shall wander from sea to sea and from north to east, and they shall run to and fro, that same word used there, to
Right.
seek the word of the Lord, but they shall not find it. So, what are they running for? What are they looking for? They're
Yeah.
looking for the word of the Lord because the day of the Lord has come and they're looking for salvation, but they're not going to find it. Now, I will say, the beautiful thing about Daniel that makes me feel a lot better is over and over and over again, Daniel is given these visions and he talks to angels and he talks to God and he asks questions and he does not understand. And at
Mhm.
the end of Daniel 12, Daniel does not understand these things, but he is told to put these things in a book and shut them up so that future generations will understand them. Does that mean that we are the future generation? Not necessarily, because in Daniel 9, 10, 11, and 12, you see the unfolding of what we call the intertestamental period.
Sure.
And it is my view, I got to be careful when I say that though, but it is my view that the first century Jews should have looked at Daniel and seen Jesus.
Mhm.
That's the generation for whom these things were looking for. Uh,
Sure.
and so, yeah, this whole running to and fro. And now, I will say the thing about knowledge increasing. I told you I had a little anecdote for you.
Yeah, there you go.
Plato said that with the invention of writing, that it was going to be writing is a technological advancement, right?
Mhm.
It's taking symbols and applying sounds to them phonetically. But Plato said that if you start writing, then everybody's going to get stupid.
Mhm.
And so my question is, what constitutes the advancement of knowledge?
Mm.
Because technically, writing was the advancement of knowledge.
Yeah.
Agriculture, animal husbandry is the advancement of knowledge.
Yeah.
Military warfare, the system of warfare that the Romans used is advancement of knowledge. Philosophy is the advancement of knowledge. Surgery is the advancement of knowledge. Does it have to be the Enlightenment? Does it have to be the Industrial Revolution? Does it have to be artificial intelligence? Like, how do we know what the advancement of knowledge is?
Mm,
That's a serious question that we need to ask if we're going to make this apply to our day.
absolutely. Um, and so you look at that, and I'm not going to ask you to flat out interpret all of Daniel chapter 12, but trying to purposely make a connection from Revelation to Daniel back to Revelation, Joshua, as we've talked about before, is leaving out a whole lot of context.
Hmm.
Right. And again, going back to, if I want to make the Bible say something specific, if I want to eisegete a belief into it, this is exactly what you would expect. And again, nothing on this guy particular. Again, I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm calling this guy out. I do think that there are definitely some people that agree with his theory and not necessarily his certainty
Hmm.
when it comes to AI being mentioned in the Bible and how these might be indicators of a particular time. Um, but this is exactly what you would expect if you had a preconceived notion and wanted the Bible to validate your preconceived notion. You would look at an isolated passage in Revelation, connect it back to Daniel, and then go back to Revelation again, right? And so he's kind of piling these all on top of one another. So we were in Revelation 9, then Daniel chapter 12, and then he finishes up this video looking at Revelation chapter 13. And so, Joshua, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong, because he says, and I quote, if I can bring this back up real quick, he says that in Revelation 13, John says, so again, he's attributing this quote to the author. He says that John says he is looking 2,000 years into the future when he sees this image in Revelation 13. Um, I read Revelation 13 three times before we got on here. You correct me. Nowhere in Revelation 13 does John say, "And I looked 2,000 years into the future, and this is what I saw."
I would argue that he says the opposite. Despite,
So
despite those many words, because when he talks about the beast, it says he rose out of the sea, verse 1, 10
mhm.
horns, 7 heads, 10 diadems on his horns,
So
and
and pause right
blasphemous.
there real quick. Like this right here is exactly where I like to bring people when I talk about apocalyptic literature, and when we say that it's weird,
Mm,
right? And you don't have to make everything mean something, but this is a part that I love where it's like, hey, look, this is a beast coming out of the sea that has 10 horns and 7 heads and 10 crowns, and where blasphemous names were written. And I saw a leopard and a bear. And
mm,
like, there's a lot of stuff here that we want to make mean something.
yeah,
Um,
but
we
it
don't,
does. But see, so
you're
here,
right. You're
so
right.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. These beasts that are described are exactly what is described in the book of Daniel.
Yes.
And Daniel tells us what those beasts are. They
Yes.
are Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And the
Sure.
final is Rome, and they're all waiting for the coming everlasting kingdom of the Son of Man, the rider on the clouds. That's what we're waiting, this everlasting kingdom. So I would argue that Revelation 13 doesn't look 2,000 years into the future,
Sure.
but looks, let's call it 300 to 500 years in the past.
Yeah. So let me phrase. We want to make it mean something that it's not, right? Like we want to
Yeah,
give it a new definition for what it is. And so again, that when you start at
someone
Revelation,
wants to use Daniel to prove his point. Read Daniel.
exactly, right? And so it was just again ironic why we'd go from Revelation day to Revelation to point to something that's happening in our current day, right? In the year of our good Lord 2026, right? However you want to phrase that. Um, which again I just thought was really funny. So, but I guess maybe a sidebar to this is for anybody that's watching stuff like this at home. Um, when somebody speaks quickly and confidently, it's really easy to take them at their word.
Mm,
And sometimes we feel maybe a bit off kilter when somebody says things so matter of factly and we want to take their word for it. Um, it's really easy when somebody makes a claim like that to be able to check it, right? John says he's looking 2,000 years into the future in Revelation chapter 13. Just read it, right? There's a lot of weird stuff there, but just read it. Nowhere does it say that John is looking 2,000 years into the future. So right off the bat, you can go, okay, well, maybe this guy's not 100% sure in what he's thinking about. But In Revelation 13, he says he saw a statue, and men were able to give that statue life. Now, his claim, Joshua, is that the statue that he finds, which this is Revelation 13, really 11 through the end of the chapter, right? This is the second beast that's mentioned there, the beast coming up from the earth that had two horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon, which again is really just fun language to look at. It exercises all authority over the first beast. And compels those on the earth to worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed, and also perform signs causing fire to come down from the heaven in front of people. He claims that this is a robot. Again, I struggle to figure out what statue he's referring to, but he's referring to a robot that was given life, and that the life specifically was electricity. Now, if you look at verses 14 and 15, it's talking about this beast who deceives those people who live on the earth, the signs it was permitted to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who live on the earth to make an image. Okay. And so this is where he's getting the term statue, right? Is to make this image or statue, or his argument, robot, right? Of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet live. And it was permitted to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could both speak and cause whoever would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Okay. He is making the argument that this image is a robot, and that he is using the word breath there to mean life, and he is interpreting life as electricity, right? Again, his words, not mine, right? I'm not putting words into his mouth. This is exactly what he explains in the video, is that he is saying that this is life, this is electricity that was given, right? And so it's this image, um, that is AI. That this is an AI, an artificial intelligent type robot, who is going to be able to cause anybody who would not worship the beast, or worship the image of the beast, to be killed, right? And it makes everyone, small, great, rich, poor, free, slave, to receive the mark on his right hand or on his forehead, the mark of the beast, which is 666. And that's the big part of Revelation that we always hone in on, right? The 666. It's why you don't drink Monster anymore, Joshua, right? Because that's the mark of the beast. You got one right there. So, do you want to break that down any at all for
I would very much love the
our,
opportunity.
our wonderful viewers at home?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Uh,
I don't laugh to make light of this. This is just mine and Joshua's sense of humor when you think about the mental jujitsu that one has to perform to get to a certain place can sometimes only be comical.
Well, let's break this down like you said. The first beast resembles the nations that were mentioned in the book of Daniel, and Daniel even tells us what those nations are. So the second beast, verse 11 says it had two horns like a lamb, spoke like a dragon. So it looks like the lamb. Well, we already met the lamb in
Mm-hmm.
Revelation. The lamb is Jesus, the lamb who was slain and yet lives. So
Right.
it looks like something promising. It looks like something good, and yet its words are not.
Mm-hmm.
So notice also it speaks of performing great signs, making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. That's verse 13. And so all of these great things that it's doing are attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we look at this in context, Rome is that great nation, that final great nation. And now Rome has reached Asia Minor, of which the book of Revelation is originally addressed, chapters 2 and 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is this desire for Rome to say, "Hey, just come be part of us, worship our emperors, do what we tell you, and everything will be wonderful and it'll be utopia." Which, by the way, is what our government entities tell us today. If you just do what we say,
Sure.
then it'll be utopia, and it never is, right? Because the only utopia is ultimately with God.
Sure.
So. What happens then if you don't do that? If you don't, as it says in verse 15, worship the image of the beast to be slain. So
Yeah.
right. So that's the issue that the church is dealing with here. This second beast wants to recruit people to worship the first beast.
Right.
That's what we know,
Right.
and we need to remember that that's exactly what's happening in this culture of Asia Minor. That Rome is recruiting people of Asia Minor to join their forces. Now, I think contextually that makes a lot more sense than talking about AI.
Right.
Also, if life is only electricity, then you've really removed the image of God there.
Yeah,
There's got
for
to be
sure.
something that separates the human from the machine,
Yeah,
and that's the idea of consciousness, and that's a big talk right now in
yeah,
epistemology. So,
yes.
yeah,
Well, and you've got the word, like I said, it was permitted to give breath or life. Joshua, you'd have to correct me of what the actual language there is, but usually that word breath or life carries with the connotation of spirit. Is that
mhm.
word that is usually used? That breath and spirit are usually the ones that are synonymous with one another. Um, Again, spirit and electricity, if you were referring to something along the lines of electricity, I feel like again, this is me. I'm not necessarily saying what John should or shouldn't have done, but again, based on the context that I believe this to be in, if you wanted to say something along the lines of electricity, there were words closer related to this idea of light or power or movement. I don't know why you would choose the word spirit there, or breath if you're John and you're referring to something like electricity. And again, now granted, the argument probably made is he just saw this statue come to life, so to speak. So maybe there's something there. Um, but
Well,
I do see
let's
this.
look at the purpose for the breath. Uh,
Sure, sure,
it,
sure.
it says in what verse? What verse are we talking about? I
This
was
is verse
looking
15, right? It was
verse
permitted
15,
to give
right?
breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could speak and cause whoever would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
Right. Well, what was happening to Christians in that time? If you didn't worship the beast, in other words, if you didn't fall in line with Rome, you were
Right,
killed. And this phrase, so that is a purpose clause. So the
right.
whole purpose of being given the breath is so that this entity would have the ability to persecute even greater,
Mhm.
to slay those who don't worship the
Right,
image. So I'm hard pressed to find any connection to sentient technology here.
sure.
It just doesn't make sense contextually.
Well, and so again, as I was looking into this, this image, the idea of the image being an enforcer for a larger entity, I've actually seen some people give credence to that being uh, the government on a whole scale, right? When you think about the amount of technology that we have that surveils us, right? That we're under constant watch, but nothing that would suggest this is we're getting ready to live in the time of Terminator, right?
Hmm.
This is, in fact, I was actually one guy was talking about this about how he believed Revelation 13 was actually referring to Disney specifically, the Disney Corporation. If you walk around Disney World for any length of time, you're going to notice animatronics, and those animatronics, some of them are very, very, very good,
Hmm.
right? And so you've got this robot that now all of a sudden has life. But that doesn't, it's again, in my opinion, and only my opinion, it's a far cry from a an animatronic at Disney World to that animatronic then breaking free and enforcing some type of agenda through no means of its own, right? And so a lot of these things um, are theory, right? When we want to try, and again, I'm not saying that the guy, I'm please don't hear what I'm not saying. I am not saying that the interpretation that his or the Thurgood, I'm not saying that his interpretation of Revelation I agree with as correct, but this is his theory and his interpretation of apocalyptic literature, right? And so I think that that is something that needs to be taken with a grain of salt. That this is something that, for the most part, people have spent massive amounts of time of their life on and have not come up with every single answer to what this is or what this is supposed to be. Joshua, I know several folks that would say that this isn't even an issue that ought to divide Christians on how you interpret certain parts of Revelation. Again, whether you agree or disagree with that, maybe it's not the conversation, but maybe the main part of the conversation I wanted to kind of get back to. Um, when you look at things like this, I don't want the audience to leave with us thinking that we're trying to sweep under the rug an issue that might very well be pressing to the church today. And so, Joshua, I kind of want to leave this one finally up to you. I am not in any way, form, or fashion endorsing Revelation 9:13 or Daniel 12 as AI mentioned in the Bible. That being said, should Christians be concerned with maybe the popularity of AI and what it has the ability to do.
Yeah, so this is a huge ethical issue that has been coming up recently in Christian ethics circles. And I mentioned the book 2084. John Lennox actually put out, that book was published in 2014, I believe. He put out a new version of it, and the new version is much longer than the
Yeah.
original. So I would very much encourage people to
Well, a
read
lot's
that.
happened since 2014.
Yes. Well, so here's the thing, because I get asked all the time, as you do, like, should Christians use AI? What is it? Well, we need to remember artificial intelligence
Mhm.
is anything artificial that does something intelligent. A calculator is
Sure.
artificial intelligence. Google is artificial intelligence. Your cell phone, your microwave, it's artificial intelligence. And we've used that ever since they've been in existence, and we haven't really thought much of it. What we're really concerned about now are what's called large language models, which is ChatGPT,
Sure.
Grok, things like that. The ability to just spout out these things. And with every technological advancement, we lose an element of human intelligence.
Yes.
And that's what concerns me. I have students who write their essays as ChatGPT, and I'm very concerned that the next generation is not going to have the intellectual ability to logic or reason or
Mhm.
even write for that
Yeah.
matter. Now, what Linux writes about in the book is like artificial intelligence for surveillance purposes. That, like, even in China now, they have these cameras that can tell who you are without seeing your face, as
Sure.
long as they can see how you walk.
Right.
And China now has a social credit system that, I mean, if I jaywalk, I may not be able to buy a house
Mhm.
because that would impact my social credit system. That's very concerning. It's very much a 1984, to use
Yes.
Orwell's.
That's what I was about to say. This is not a new concept, right?
It's not a new concept.
In
Brave New
2084,
World, 1984, these dystopian uh, books
Big
have sort
Brother-esque.
of, yeah, they've sort of predicted this in somewhat of a prophetic way, because they saw the trends of what was happening in their
Yeah.
time and where we were headed. And so the Christian needs to realize, number one, that in order for something to be a creation, the creator has to exist outside of and be sovereign over it. So in
Mhm.
Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth. He exists outside of time, space, and matter, and he is sovereign over it.
Mhm.
AI is an invention of humanity.
Sure.
Humanity will always exist outside of AI, and we will always be sovereign over it because that's how creation works.
Mhm.
Now, we need to be careful, number one, to maintain our integrity. We don't need to use AI and then pass it off as our own. We need to be people of honesty. I think it can be a great tool, but I see AI, especially like ChatGPT and Grok and things like that, the way that we viewed Facebook whenever it first came out. Like, oh,
Mhm.
this is a wonderful thing. We can have connection. We can keep up with people on the other side of the world. And it has really cost us our soul.
Mhm.
Just read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. It
Yeah.
has really cost us our soul. And I think that's what AI is going to do. And what I'm seeing now with social media is I'm seeing people our age and younger generations not on social media and actually actively not using
Avoiding
it.
it.
And I think what's going to happen with AI is I think our current generation that's growing up will grow up with AI. They'll depend on AI. And then the next generation or generation after that will look at AI the way we look at social media and say, no, I don't want this. This is
Yeah.
harmful and we're not going to do it. So I think AI is here to stay. I think AI is going to be incredibly useful in the realm of like medical advancements in science and mathematics, but I don't think it can replace human epistemology or
Sure.
theology, and that's where I'm seeing now a huge rise in philosophical conversation and theological conversation that hasn't been with moral relativism. So I really think that AI has its place. Finding what that place is going to be a
Sure.
real adventure.
Sure. And so this is what I tell everybody that's ever asked me about AI and whether they should be worried. I get a lot of people that are kind of like, well, is AI going to take away jobs? Are we, are there going to be AI? The entertainment industry specifically. There was a massive thing that happened probably 2 or 3 years ago now, where writers were potentially going on strike around Hollywood because they thought that scripts were going to start becoming generated by AI and that these
Mhm.
computers are going to be able to write better stories or so on and so forth. Um, I tell everybody with AI, it is the same thing as any other thing that man has ever created. There are two things you need to worry about. You need to worry about your discernment when using them, and you need to worry about your use, right? So as you navigate the world of AI, being discerning of what is AI and what isn't AI is very, very, very important. Being discerning of the kind of character that you carry with you with AI as an actual tool, right? Joshua, if I heard it once growing up, I heard it 10,000 times. I had to learn how to do math longhand because I was never going to be able to walk around with a calculator in my pocket every day, right?
Hmm.
Um, you know, I can't do math longhand anymore, right? I mean, I can do some stuff, but you give me an algebra equation, I can't do it longhand. There's absolutely no way. I don't use it in my everyday life. As far, sorry, math teachers, I don't mean to like go, stomping on your parade or whatever. But if I need to know what 37 times 124 is, guess what? I'm pulling my phone out and I'm using my calculator. I don't care to try to do that longhand. Same thing is true with AI. You're growing up with AI as a thing that exists, and you have to discern what is and isn't going to be an appropriate use of that. And that's the other part of it, right? How I use it, how I choose to use it. And a lot of that boils down to the character that we have as Christians. Am I going to use AI to make everything in my life a shortcut? Or am I going to use AI as a supplemental tool to benefit me when it's appropriate, right? You were mentioning, Joshua, things like 2084 and 1984. I want to go out on the record and say that I do not necessarily recommend this movie to anybody. But if you've ever, you know where I'm going with this. If you've ever seen the movie Idiocracy, a lot of what we're experiencing, something that was made as a parody back in 2006, now all of a sudden is really kind of scary because of how accurate some of that stuff is.
Yeah.
And so there is a sense in which the more you know, the dumber you get. Right.
Right.
There's the reason that cliche has stuck around for as long as it has. And AI is certainly one of those tools that if you're not careful, you'll use it in a way that takes away knowledge that you need in
Yeah.
how you go about doing things. And so for Christians specifically, understanding that AI is not the devil as long as you are able to use it appropriately and with a certain amount of discernment. But again, you could say that about literally anything that
You
man has
can.
ever.
And I think too, one thing that we didn't bring up, we don't have time to bring up is, I mean, AI now has these things. It's not just, you know, in writing or research or doing math
Sure.
or even surveillance. I mean, have you seen the AI girlfriends and
Oh yeah.
boyfriends?
Yeah. That's the other thing with teens, and it's becoming a thing with teens specifically. People are looking for AI for relationship,
Yeah, yeah,
and connection,
yeah.
and that
And
is
that's
something
when
that
you
is very
start seeing AI as like a person.
yes.
And you can, this is what scares me about AI is you, first of all, AI tells you what you want to hear all the time.
Mhm. Sure.
It's a narcissism builder.
Sure.
And secondly, why would I ever want a human relationship when I can have the most perfect thing at my beck and call every time? I mean, even with the VR glasses, you can see the person you've created. What AI is doing is it is turning us into God. We're making gods of ourselves. We are
Mhm.
creating, we are being omnipresent, and we are being omniscient. You can have
Mhm.
all knowledge, be anywhere in the world, and create whatever you want. And that is incredibly dangerous because only God can do those things.
Sure. And so again, it goes back to the how I choose to use it, and if I'm discerning how I'm using it. And again,
Mhm.
with literally anything, you can apply those things. But Joshua, this has been a really fun conversation. Again, I know AI is one of those things that I agree with you in a sense that I don't believe AI is going away at least anytime soon. Um, I think that as long as humans have the ability to think and to reason, we're going to try to continue to do things that move us forward, quote unquote, for those
Mhm.
that are listening. Whether that actually benefits us or not, I don't know if it's going to benefit us as much as we think it will in
Well,
some regards. But
I've been reading the Southern Agrarians lately, and one thing that
of
they
course
argue
you have,
is,
because who wouldn't just casually read that?
well, everybody should. But one thing that they argued is we do all this stuff, like all these advancements in technology, for
Yeah,
example, because we need progress. Well,
yeah,
why do we need progress?
yeah.
What we need is to be content
Well,
and to be truly human. That's what we need.
I tell you what's really funny. Somebody brought this out to me the other day, and I think this is really funny. You said For every app that you have nowadays, for every single bit of technology that we own, you know what's still being produced?
Mm.
The Farmer's Almanac.
Not anymore.
Is it? Well, it is digitally,
It's
isn't it?
digitally. They're not printing it anymore.
But it's still being produced digitally, and even the digital copy of the Farmer's Almanac is still more accurate than most of what is being put out there today, which I know you get a big kick out of that. But sometimes maybe, um, you know, there's a sense in which we've already got the information that we need. And instead of looking for more, maybe we go back and look at what's correct, if
Well,
that
see, the
makes sense.
Farmer's Almanac is a, a technological advancement.
Ah, see, and so now we're back. It's the
Now we're
original AI. It's the original AI. The Farmer's Almanac is. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this. Again, if you ever have any video that you want us to check out, please be sure to do so. Send it to us. We'd love for us to be able to talk about things that you guys want to talk about. This is part of the reason we're having this conversation. We will eventually have guests back on again. I know it's been a minute since Joshua and I were able to get somebody on. I know you guys are just tired of listening and looking at just the two of us, but it's coming. It's happening. We're 55 episodes in. We will continue to do so as long as we can. We want to give a huge shout out to the Ministry League. We're part of their network of podcasters. They have a lot of really great stuff. You can check them out on YouTube as well. And guys, until next time, Joshua, I hope you have a great rest of the week and month. And who knows what's going to happen between now and the next time we record. But we love everybody, and we hope to see you then.